What God has joined together, let no man separate. Jesus told this to the Pharisees, written in the books of Matthew chapter 19 verse 6 and in Mark chapter 10 verse 9. I believe this is the foundation of marriage, and I strongly agree with this. Two become one flesh, and therefore, if that union is joined together by God, no one can separate. Such a strong pillar of oneness in a vow called marriage. This is what churches are holding on to, such that when a married couple reach to a point of getting separated or planning to separate due to several different reasons and conflicts, religious leaders stood up strong to object the separation and defend what Jesus has commanded, that if it is joined together by God, no one can separate. However, did anyone ever define the phrase joined together by God? Does this mean the marriage contract or certificate, the document where a man and a woman affix their signatures? Let us try to examine this together. If the proof of a couple being considered as joined together by God is the marriage contract such that it only requires to be signed by both parties, then it is done. Closed deal, and there's no way that it can be changed or nullified. Sounds interesting. Let me give you one example. In case of a forced marriage, does it mean the two persons were joined together by God because they have their signatures affixed on the paper? I don't think our loving and just God will create a scenario like this and call it joined together by Him. In this case, it is no longer joined together by God but by man. Another example, both men and both women getting married. Are these cases can be called joined together by God because they have the paper signed by both parties, including their witnesses and sponsors? I don't think so either, because God's basic requirement is clearly mentioned in Genesis chapter 2 verses 20-24 in the Old Testament and in Matthew chapter 19 verses 4-5 in the New Testament. It didn't change. It should be a man and a woman. Based on the examples, can you still say that a marriage contract is the proof of a couple to be called joined together by God? I don't think so. Paper is just a physical element that justifies a marriage, but not a proof of being joined together by God. Therefore, a couple can get married, but not necessarily joined together by God. It is a case-to-case basis. Again, it is a case-to-case basis. So if it is not the paper that defines being joined together by God, what is it then? How can we see it in a marital union? In the Old Testament, it was a simple requirement of God, at least a man and a woman, right? As a matter of fact, woman was defined as part of the man to clearly differentiate it from a man. In addition to this, when Jesus came during the New Testament, guidelines was drafted to correct the ambiguity in the past. One set of clear guidelines are mentioned in Ephesians chapter 5 verses 21-33. I call it God's marriage guidelines. Isn't it written by the Apostle Paul? Yes, it is. But Jesus' disciples, including the Apostle Paul, were filled with the Holy Spirit. That's why they were able to write something on behalf of the Lord. I have read it the first time in March or April 2020. The message was so clear and straightforward, but there was a bit of confusing statements that I felt the need to read it again and again. By the way, one important requirement in reading the scriptures is our humility. Otherwise, the true message won't be revealed. How is it? When the Apostle Paul was once a Pharisee named Saul, with his solid critical knowledge in theology, he still didn't get the exact revelations of God. In fact, he was persecuting God and he thought that he was doing the right thing. Why is it so? Because he was proud of his knowledge in theology. Take note that pride covers the true revelations of the Lord. When he was humbled by God, changed his identity and character, he then was able to receive the true message. This is the very reason why we need a pact of humility when reading the scriptures. Going back to the marriage guidelines, if two persons, a male and a female, mature enough to understand very well all the guidelines that God has set, were given enough time to assess their minds and hearts, have thought about their respective roles deeper as a husband and a wife, realize that the union they are planning to enter into is lifetime, not contractual, and acknowledge God's design of union between two persons as one flesh, have decided to proceed for the marriage, then we can now call it joined together by God. I continuously pray that church leaders will be able to come up with a proactive process to deliver the guidelines to all couples planning to receive the union called marriage, properly, objectively, emphatically, and explicitly.
Fuck her